What if, instead of inventing the wheel, some of our ancestors learned to tame dragons? What if feudalism developed not under the eye of warriors defending against other warriors, but under the eye of dragon riders defending against vicious animals? With dragon flight speeding up the spread of information, would there have been an increase in technological innovation? These what-ifs are more than just creative exercises. They're the building blocks of inflection points, moments in history that can reshape your world and its cultures. And in today's episode, we'll focus on how to identify these key moments in your world and how you can build them to create a culture that supports your story. Welcome to the second episode of Deep Fantasy Building with Just in Time World and your host, Marie Mullaney. When you're creating the history of your fantasy world, inflection points are the moments where a major shift occurs. The moment that shape not just your world's history, but its culture, politics, and identity. Whether it's a magical disaster, a war, or a technological breakthrough, these events leave ripples that change everything that follows. As a world builder, these inflection points allow you to shape your culture into what you need for your plot. Let's take an example. So maybe you want your mages in your world to be tightly controlled, but your magic system is quite powerful, allowing mages to far exceed the power of common people. And you want that magic system as well. So you start with a society where there are mages on top, right? So they have grown to dominate the people. And then you build an inflection point where the common people can rebel against mages. And in order to ensure that mages won't turn on the common people again, you include a technological advance where the common people build a magic item that allows them to control the mages. And now, in the current time of your story, all people are tested for mage power and fitted with the earrings of control if they have a talent for magic. And voila, you've gone from a culture ruled by mages to a culture where mages are enslaved by the common people. So that's what an inflection point is. But how do you decide which inflection points you need for your culture? And more importantly, how do you create these moments in a way that feels authentic and impactful? Step 1. Identify key areas for change. The first step is deciding where your culture needs to shift. Basically, where you need an inflection point. To do this, consider the natural course of your culture. In the example we spoke of above, this is where a powerful magic system creates a magocracy-style society where mages rules and common people rule. Then, consider the culture you need for the story you want to tell. So, in this case, your story might be about a mage who is trying to advocate for the freedom of mages, for the right of mages to use their power. Okay, so the magocracy-style society obviously won't work for that story, since in a magocracy-style society, mages are the only ones who are free. They're at the top of the dog pile. So you need to tilt the society on its head, and that leads you to creating the rebellion by the common people and the suppression of mages. And that's the inflection point that you need for your story. So your story dictates your culture, and you build the inflection point to alter the natural flow of history of your world to create that culture for your story. So in essence, you need to create your pre-inflection point culture first, and then determine what that culture needs to look like post-inflection point in order to build the right type of inflection point. The pre-inflection point is how your society would naturally evolve, while the post-inflection point is the transformed culture after a major event or shift. Okay, to do that, consider the following aspects of your culture in terms of what it needs to look like. 1. Power structures. Who holds power before the inflection point, and who holds it after the inflection point? Consider all forms of power here: political, religious, economic, magical, and so on. And for inspiration, think about how a major war or revolution can alter power dynamics, much like the fall of the Roman Empire shifted Europe's political landscape, creating a fragmented society that led to the rise of the decentralized system of feudalism. 2. Consider your technology or magic. What is the technological and magical state before the inflection point? How about afterwards? Technological shifts have dramatically impacted our world, and the same could and should happen in your world. Consider the invention of the printing press, the Industrial Revolution, or even the Agricultural Revolution way back in the past. In the same way, technology or magic can create great inflection points in your world. For instance, what if a powerful new magic suddenly became accessible to everyone, toppling the existing order of mages and kings? Or in our example above, common people figure out how to constrain magic, leading to the revolution. 3. Don't forget about cultural values. What were the cultural norms and values before the inflection point? And what about afterward? Why did they change? This kind of change could be because of a religious revelation, a philosophical shift, or even the appearance of a new dominant species or magical force that changes societal norms. Maybe your culture once valued physical strength, but after an era of magical rule, they now value intelligence or cunning. And if you need some help in creating cultural norms, I have a video on that very topic as part of my Worldbuilding Blueprints podcast, which you can check out in the information card. Okay, so that tells you where your culture is before the inflection point and where it stands after the inflection point. Now, let's move on to the sandwich part in the middle, building the inflection point. The key to creating inflection points is understanding the pressures that lead to change. These pressures can come from political upheaval, social unrest, economic factors, magical events, or even environmental disasters. And here's how to construct a powerful inflection point using some examples. 1. Start with the pressure. Every inflection point is born out of tension. This tension can come from many sources. So think about the underlying pressures in your world that would drive a culture to breaking point. Here are several types of pressure you can use. Political pressure. Think about how political conflict can lead to dramatic societal changes. For example, an empire that expands too quickly might face internal rebellion from conquered peoples. The Roman Empire, for instance, faced constant internal pressure from its vast size and varied cultures, leading to civil wars that ultimately weakened it. In your world, a kingdom could expand too far, straining its resources and forcing the ruling class to make difficult concessions, which then sparks a revolution that changes who holds power. Social pressure. Social tension often arises from inequality or systematic injustice. Imagine a society where the common people are ruled by a powerful mage class. Over time, resentment builds as non-magic users are oppressed, leading to an uprising. This pressure boils over into an inflection point where the commoners overthrow the magocracy, instituting a new society where magic is feared and regulated, or even outlawed entirely. 3. Economic pressure. Economic strain can force massive societal shifts, particularly if resources are scarce or trade collapses. For example, think about a society that depends on a magical resource, like a rare crystal that powers all of its technology. What happens when that resource starts to run out? This creates an inflection point where society must either adapt to new technologies, spark wars over dwindling supplies, or even collapse into chaos as the ruling elite struggles to maintain control. Historically, events like the Great Depression pushed nations towards significant societal and political changes. Magical or technological pressure. A sudden breakthrough in magic or technology can radically alter the balance of power. Imagine a new discovery that allows non-magic users to wield powerful magical artifacts, leveling the playing field between them and the ruling class. Much like the invention of guns in our world, this magical advance could shift military and political dynamics overnight, as the once powerless now have access to incredible strength. The invention of firearms completely changed medieval warfare, and in your world, a magical gunpowder moment could trigger similar shifts in power structures. And then there's religious and philosophical pressure. Sometimes a new religion or belief system can shake the foundations of a society. Imagine a long-established monarchy that bases its rule on divine right. Then a new religious movement sweeps through the population, challenging the monarchy's authority by claiming the gods favor the common people. This ideological shift creates tension, and perhaps a civil war erupts between those who cling to the old faith and those who embrace the new. This could be inspired by real-world examples like the Protestant Reformation, which challenged the Catholic Church's authority and sparked political upheaval across Europe. And then there's also environmental pressure. Natural disasters or climate change can force societies into dramatic change. Think about an ice age that creeps across your fantasy world, making much of the land uninhabitable. Societies that once thrived in fertile valleys must now migrate to new territories, coming into conflict with those cultures that are already there. Historically, we've seen climate change force migrations and collapse of empires, such as the fall of the Akkadian Empire, which some historians attribute to a long period of drought. In a fantasy world, you can go beyond events like a volcano or a great flood, and you can have some sort of magical disaster, like two mages battling each other, and because of their magical battle, destroying all the fertile land around them, creating an instantaneous disaster that sends people fleeing and evokes a hatred for magic. So you can use environmental pressure to great effect in a fantasy world. The decision around which pressure to use is driven by what your post-inflection society should look like. You want the inflection point to drive the change you need in the culture. So bring the right kind of pressure to bear to create your post-inflection point society. Also, bear in mind that often multiple pressures like economic strain and political unrest work together to create an inflection point. For example, the fall of the Roman Empire involved economic collapse, political corruption, and external invasions all happening essentially simultaneously. And speaking of post-inflection point societies, your second step in building the inflection point is define the change. Once you know the pressure, define what changes, either as a result or as a triggering event. The inflection point should lead to a significant shift in power, technology, culture, or geography. Consider the following elements. Collapse of empire. As mentioned earlier, political or economic strain might lead to the collapse of a great empire, much like the fall of Rome or the fall of the Targaryens in A Song of Ice and Fire. What emerges after this collapse? Perhaps smaller kingdoms rise from the ashes with new forms of governance like feudalism or democracy. This power vacuum could create opportunities for new factions to seize control, and the world is left in a state of constant flux. Consider revolution or rebellion. A social uprising, perhaps led by a charismatic leader or figurehead, could radically alter your world's political structure. After overthrowing the ruling class, what kind of new society emerges? Do they create a more egalitarian state? Or does the rebellion lead to chaos and tyranny? For instance, the French Revolution promised equality and freedom, but ultimately descended into the reign of terror before Napoleon seized control. And if you need more guidance on these topics, I have a whole mini-series around rebellion and revolution linked in the information card. Also consider technological or magical shifts. If your inflection point revolves around a technological or magical advancement, how does society adapt to this new reality? For example, the Industrial Revolution brought mass production, urbanization, and changed the entire fabric of daily life. The printing press was basically the trigger for the Reformation movement in Europe. So there was pressure to change, and then the new invention comes along and triggers the inflection point. In your world, perhaps a magical invention, such as a new method of teleportation, completely upends traditional trade routes, forcing economies to shift and potentially bankrupting nations that relied on the old infrastructure. And that brings us to consider the consequences. The consequences of your inflection point should ripple through generations, shaping everything from political borders to cultural norms. For example, consider power vacuums and factions. When an empire falls or a ruling class is overthrown, there's often a power vacuum. Who steps into that void? Perhaps warring factions or rival kingdoms compete to establish dominance, leading to centuries of conflict. Or perhaps new political structures, such as republics or guild-based governments, rise in place of the fallen monarchy. There can also be shifts in belief systems. A philosophical or religious shift could cause dramatic changes in society. After the introduction of a new religion or philosophy, old traditions might be discarded or outlawed. Entire regions may split from the rest of the kingdom or empire due to these ideological differences, creating new borders and alliances. And that brings us to consider geographical consequences. Environmental inflection points can change not only your society, but also your world's actual geography. If those two majors fighting creates a wasteland, it leaves an entire region uninhabitable, creating a magical dead zone where life cannot survive. How do people view these places in the present day? Are they avoided? Or do some brave souls venture in there, seeking knowledge or magical artifacts that remain? Okay, so that gives you the inflection point, right? That's all you need. You need to know what the change is, what the pressure is, and kind of what happens. No. That gives you the outline of the inflection point. But to detail it, to flesh it out, you need to think of step 3. Characters, events, and symbols. This is where you can create the deep lore that will give your world weight and history. So let's break apart the 3 aspects that make up an inflection point and how each builds their own deep lore. Starting with characters. Every inflection point needs characters who drives the change. These are the heroes, villains, or tragic figures whose decisions lead to the inflection point. Consider figures like Fëanor in the Silmarillion, whose creation of the Silmaril sparks war and forever alters Middle-earth. In your world, who are the key players in your inflection point? Were they rulers, revolutionaries, or religious figures? And how do the names of these characters echo through the history of your world? Are they remembered as mythic figures, as heroes of history? Are their names lost to history and they are only known by the role they played in creating the New World Order? When creating these characters, remember there is what really happened and who these people really were. And then there is what is remembered in the current day and age, and how these people are seen by the characters of your actual story, which can be quite dramatically different. Mythic heroes are not seen with nuance. So bear that in mind when you're creating the myths that result from your inflection point. But characters don't act in isolation. Every inflection point revolves around key events that mark the turning point in history. So, what are the key moments during the inflection point? Is there a climactic battle, a catastrophic event, or a political coup? These events should resonate through history, leaving marks on the culture for generations. For example, the doom of Valeria in A Song of Ice and Fire isn't just a historical fact. Its consequences are still felt centuries later in the Targaryens' rule of Westeros and the political landscape of that kingdom, even though the doom happened centuries before the main plot. The Doom is a mysterious event that brought about the downfall of the Dragon Riders of Valeria and set the scene for the rise of the Targaryen kings over Westeros. And even though those events are shrouded in mystery, everyone knows the Doom happened. And that is the mythos that exists in the current day. So events shape the world, but symbols help the memory of those moments live on, adding layers to the culture's identity, like the dragon symbols of the Targaryen kings. So consider what object symbols arise from in your inflection point. These could be magical artifacts or relics, or even everyday objects that become symbols of power or history, like the hat of the French Revolution. A sword could be passed down through generations, or a crown forged in rebellion, or a throne created from melting your enemy's swords in the fire of your dragon. All of these create symbols that provide a powerful way for the characters of your story to interact with the deep lore generated by your inflection point. A character could hold the broken hilt of his ancestor's sword as Aragorn held Andúril's hilt, and could reflect on the past and what it means for the present. Or an unworthy king could struggle to sit on the Iron Throne, and the swords could cut into their flesh, as we see in A Song of Ice and Fire. And in my podcast on world-building blueprints, there is an episode about creating symbols as well. Okay, so symbols, events, characters, right? Sure. But that brings us to the last point of creating a deep lore inflection point. Make it relevant to your story. The final step is ensuring that your inflection points connect back to your story. Deep lore is only useful if it serves the narrative. So ask yourself, how do the consequences of this inflection point affect your characters and plot? Does a long-standing feud from a civil war still impact your protagonist's family? Is there a prophecy linked to a magical disaster that's now coming to fruition? By weaving these pivotal moments into your story, you're not just building a world, you're building a living, breathing backdrop that enhances your characters and your plot. It makes the world feel alive and immersive to your readers. Inflection points shape your world in lasting ways. By identifying where your culture needs to shift and fleshing out the characters, events, symbols around these shifts, you can build a history that feels deep and relevant to your story. Let me know in the comments how you would use inflection points to change the shape of cultures in your world. I hope this episode helped you understand how to use inflection points to build deep lore in your world. And if you've enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button. And to ensure that you get the rest of this series as they come out, ring the bell to be alerted when I release new episodes. And speaking of new episodes, next time we'll delve into constructing fantasy terms all the way down to creating a whole language. And if you want access to that episode right now, go ahead and hit the join button to become a member of the channel. Members get all kinds of cool perks like exclusive world building live streams and my eternal gratitude for keeping my cats fed and, of course, early access. A very special thanks to Tiffany, Dylan, Aya, and Patricio, just-in-timers of the Build It in Wood level, and Katie and Tony, just-in-timers of the Build It in Stone level. And if you're hungry for more world-building insights, check out my video on creating fantasy prehistory, or whatever the algorithm is recommending for you on screen right now. And I will see you soon for another episode of Just in Time Worlds, where we build what we need when we need it.